to this webinar on the VS series of intelligent transmitters from Nautel. I'm Chuck Kelly, and with me today is Christy White, our VS LPFM specialist. Good afternoon, Christy.
Good afternoon, Chuck.
Nice to have you with us. So here's the things we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about the VS series concept. We're going to take a little look inside the VS, explain what it is. We're going to talk about various uses for the VS series. The first is as an exciter, which is a very popular use. In LPFM use, which is currently a very big deal. And the VS in terms of using it within a synchronous FM system. We're going to talk about very briefly about an idea called push radio. We're going to talk about the VS in HD radio mode, and that actually includes DRM+. And then we're going to take a hands-on tour through the VSA UI, and that'll be always the most fun part. And we're going to take your questions. So on your screen, you'll see, as you're attending this webinar, you'll see this the place where you can enter in questions. Feel free to write in your questions, and at the end of the webinar, Christy and I will take your questions and do our very best to answer them. If, in fact, we don't get to your question during the allotted time of the webinar, we will email you a response. So please do put your questions there as we're in the webinar, and then at the end we will answer them. So the very first thing is to introduce the VS series to you. It's the most well-outfitted, I suppose the right word, feature-rich product that we ever introduced as a product. It is a FM transmitter series of low-power transmitters from 300 watts through 2.5 kilowatts. And there's just no compromises throughout the entire thing. It's got a fully digital exciter, and I don't mean just it takes an AES EBU input. I mean that the exciter actually creates the analog FM signal in a digital way, and it's upgradable to digital radio as well, HD radio or DRM. We're going to talk about the various kinds of audio inputs, a very broad range of audio inputs that are included, talk about the application within SFNs, talk about application within digital radio. The transmitter includes the AUI control system. We'll walk through that. We'll talk about some of the audio backup features. We'll talk about push radio and Orban inside and Omnia Direct. And, of course, this transmitter also includes the 4-year Nautel broadcast transmitter warranty. So there's an awful lot of features built right in to the VS series. And that it's at a bargain price. These transmitters are a fraction of the cost that just a few years ago Nautel sold low-power FM transmitters, and or for that matter anybody else sold low-power FM transmitters. So for this caliber of transmitter, these kinds of prices are really unheard of in the industry. From a performance standpoint, there's absolutely no compromise in the VS series. It's a fully digital exciter with a digital stereo generator, signal-to-noise ratio of 90 dB, and composite stereo 80 dB. Frequency response, these numbers are much better than any other product out there, and in terms of most analog products, much better than any other product of this kind of category. Total harmonic distortion, stereo crosstalk, IMD, these performance specifications are second to none in the industry.
And now you can see this is the backside of a VS300 model. And so just to the right of the two 25-pin D-sub connectors, you're going to see the rich selection of audio inputs. So you have your AES EBU, left and right analog, composite, MPX over AES. You also have the SHOUTcast and Icecast, Livewire, and USB, which you'll notice there through the LAN interface. You also have your SCA and RDS inputs there as well with the BNC connector. So you can see that there's a wide range of audio inputs on the back of the VS. And through that LAN interface, you also have a Livewire receiver in the transmitter. So this means that you can connect your Livewire devices to your transmitter with simply a Cat5 cable. A really big advancement in terms of thinking about connecting your studio to your transmitter with one cable. You'll see there's a variety of products on the line that are Livewire enabled there as well. And in addition to the Livewire, the transmitter will also use your SHOUTcast or Icecast web broadcast, So a lot of people will do this as a backup, so you can stay on the air by rebroadcasting your SHOUTcast or Icecast stream, which can buy you a little time to figure out why your STL might have failed. And some people with really highly reliable IP paths are using it as a nearly free STL. So they're simply broadcasting their SHOUTcast or Icecast inputs, which you really need to make sure you have a good IP path so you don't get any of that buffering or other glitches along the way. And then your last resort, or another great tool for backup, is the USB ports on the back of the transmitter. You can use a USB memory stick or a hard drive, which means you can take MP3 files and create playlists to play so that if you do lose audio or if you're switching programs, you have a daily satellite feed that fails for some reason, you can use your USB as a fail-safe to keep your audio on the air, and the playlist will play one file back to back, but it still keeps you on the air, which is a really nice feature. And now the scheduler is something that came out in the latest release of VS software. So it really gives you a lot of control, rule-based programming, so you can set every day at this time or Mondays at this time. You can activate a different preset. You can do virtually unlimited entries, and you can schedule it a year in advance, so you don't have to, log in weekly. You can set it up for a whole year at a time. And it is synced with an NTP client, so you'll always know that it's on time.
And some of the things you can do with it include changing power levels on a schedule, or taking a satellite news feed at the top of every hour, or scheduling a playlist. So that's very valuable. It's something that no other transmitter that I'm aware of has as a standard feature.
Yeah, like you said, it's really great for that programming that you want to bring in from a satellite that happens, every hour on the hour, or a weekly feature.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Orban Inside is a feature that really surprised a lot of people when we came out with it. It's a DSP card that Nautel designs and builds, and we mount upon that. We license the code for the Orban 5500 series of 5-band and 2-band processing software in DSP, and it actually creates a fully compatible Orban 5500. The only exception is that it actually uses our stereo generator, part of the stereo generator that's in the VS. It's an AES in and AES out box, and it does work with all of the inputs with the exception of the composite, because obviously we don't want to demodulate the composite signal coming in. So all the other inputs it works with, except for composite. And it's only $1,200, which is a fraction of the cost of the 5500 series, or for that matter, any other audio processor of that category in the industry. And it's right inside the VS series, which means that from the AUI you can actually control it. And its controls can be parts of a preset. So if your station actually changes format at some point in the day, you can set your scheduler to change the audio processing based on the time of day and automatically switch over to a different preset on the Orban. Another feature that we came out with, and this was just a year ago, hard to imagine that it's only a year ago, but we came out with a technology that we co-developed with our friends at Omnia, and this is called Omnia Direct, or MPX over AES. And basically the concept was there are so many, there's so much good audio performance in today's audio processors that are in the digital domain, and if you wanted the maximum loudness under the typical way of interconnecting audio processors and transmitters, you had to go back down to analog and run it through a composite cable to the FM transmitter, where it was then converted again from analog to digital, and then brought into the fully digital FM exciter, such as within the VS series. So what we did is we sat down and we said, well, what if we just kept it in the digital domain the entire way? Well, there was no standard for that, so we just made one up. And basically what we said is we're going to take the multiplex signal, the composite multiplex, and put it onto an AES stream and sample it at 192 kilobits per second. And that's how it works. And it works, and it improves the audio performance and the peak control by eliminating those extra A to D and D to A conversions, which are never good. And it's now supported, which is a great thing. We won all these awards at NAB 2013 for it, but now it's supported by several other important key audio processor manufacturers and transmitter manufacturers, and we're quite proud of that. It's a standard feature in the Nautel VS series. And for more information, you'll see there's a tiny URL though. Just write down OOPWV8S and remember the tinyurl.com, and you can find a whole webinar specifically on this subject that Frank Foti and I did about a year ago. In the VS series, and I've said this before, there are no quality concessions. It's completely built here in North America in Nautel, and it's a legendary Nautel conservative design, the kind of reliability you come to expect out of a Nautel. Easy access to all connectorized boards and assemblies, totally broadband, no adjustments. That's one of the most amazing things. You look inside one of these things and you don't see potentiometers and variable capacitors and variable inductors that you have to tweak in order to get the performance right on a frequency. It just works. It's broadbanded by design, and anything you need to adjust, you can adjust through the AUI. So let's talk about now, as an exciter replacement, the transmitter is available. The 300 watt replaces virtually any exciter that I'm aware of, and the 1 kilowatt could actually replace not only the exciter but the IPA, and the same thing for the 2.5 kilowatt. So you can have a replacement for an exciter and the IPA for a very, very reasonable price. All these transmitters are designed for this purpose because they include a DC blocking capacitor and a DC short at the output. So just in case you have a screen short in the PA tube or a grid short, you're not going to blow up the back of your transmitter with the DC voltage coming back up the feed line. It's a flexible logic design, so it's relatively easy to convert for older transmitters, to update them to include the features and performance that the VS provides. And here's a couple of examples of what people have done. They've sent us the photographs of their VS series upgrading their transmitters. On the left is a Crown RVR exciter replacement. A fellow on the right has taken a Continental transmitter and upgraded it with a VS1. These folks have taken an FM30 from BE, a tube transmitter, and replaced its exciter with a VS300. On the right-hand side is an FM25K from Harris, where the exciter and the IPA have both been replaced with a VS1. And this gentleman, Mr. Fred Francis, he replaced an Energy Onix ECO-20 and used the replacement exciter, and he remarks about the huge advance in the audio performance in the transmitter. People didn't realize how good those transmitters could sound. For more information about using the VS exciter, including some interviews with customers that have done just this, use that link at the bottom there.
And Chuck was touching on it earlier that the LPFM is really important right now with the new CPs that have just been issued. And Nautel does have a VS300 LP model. So it is a VS300 that has been certified specifically for LPFM use. So it's not the same as the regular VS300. And the great thing about it is that it has all of the features that Chuck and I have already discussed, but they're available to LP stations. We did a webinar last month on that, so there is a link to the tiny URL there to that webinar and more information. And you can also feel free to contact me on that as well.
Excellent. Some broadcasters are doing these days synchronous boosters, also known as single frequency networks, SFNs. And the Nautel VS series, and our other FM transmitters for that matter, but the VS series are ideal for this purpose. They have the fully digital exciter that you need in order to make sure that you're matching the analog or audio levels the same. The modulation index is exactly the same. They have GPS inputs for both 10 megahertz and 1 part per second to synchronize the carrier and the stereo pilot, which is critical, and they have a built-in micro-adjust audio delay system, which can be adjustable in 1 microsecond steps. And this is all very, very important and used to cost thousands of dollars if you try to do an SFN system with somebody else's product. So there's a webinar on that subject as well, and the link is there, and that will give you all the details you want to ever know about how to install and design an SFN system with Nautel exciters. Push radio is a concept in which basically what happened is, Christy has talked about how we included the USB audio functionality of being able to play a playlist, play MP3 and WAV files off a USB storage device as a backup. Well, there were some people in the world that want to use it as their primary audio source, and so they came to us and started talking about that, and we decided that it was possible. If you have a network of stations that are geographically distributed over a broad area, and maybe today you're using satellite to distribute your audio, well, you might want to look at the possibility of using push radio. And the concept there is we move the storage out to the transmitter, and we actually run playlists at the transmitter. And you can run some special software, which is created by an organization called ENCO. And it actually, instead of controlling sound cards as if it's a normal automation, it's controlling Nautel transmitters over IP. And it makes sure that you have all the content at the transmitter site. It makes sure you're got the right playlist, and it actually pulls back an as-played log of the things that you've actually run on the air. More details on that and the limitations of that technology are at that URL, QJ9Z8FD. Now a couple tips and tricks. Tips and tricks is something that our Jeff Welton does, and he gave us a couple of really cool things that people have been talking to him about with regard to the VS transmitters. And the easiest one of them is these neat little boards here that allow hooking up the audio and the remote connectors off of those DB25s a little easier. So you can get those at Winford Engineering, and he's got a phone number there for those, and it makes life very easy. And also he wanted to mention about the fact that you don't necessarily want to have a straight-out connector on a VS. You may wish to have an angled connector. So he's talking about getting elbows and how those could work for you. And here he's talking about the difference in cost of doing the connector and the elbow between the EIA, which is an option, or the 7/8 DIN. And you can see the 7/8 DIN choice is a lot less expensive. So it was Jeff's recommendation that you take a look at the 7/8 DIN. And there's a lot of friends that would like to think about the possibility of doing HD radio with the VS series. The VS series is completely upgradable to digital radio using the VS HD, and this shows the power levels at the various injection levels of the transmitters in HD mode. And the transmitter is upgradable to HD radio or DRM+. It does feature adaptive pre-correction, an integral XGen card, the spectrum analyzer, and the constellation view using AUI, and there's an option for the HD power boost and reliable HD transport. And in a couple of minutes, we're going to actually show you a transmitter that's operating in HD mode at the moment. And this is probably one of the most talked about features of the VS series. There's actually a complete, well, some people call it a remote control system, but it's much more than that. It's an advanced user interface. That's what AEI stands for. And we call it that because it does much more than just simply remotely control and monitor the transmitter. It actually monitors dozens and dozens of things in the case of the VS series internal to the transmitter. We'll show you all of that. But it has a web server built right into the transmitter that you can access and control from anywhere. And it also includes advanced test equipment, including RF spectrum analyzer, multiplex spectrum analyzer, Lissajous display. Complete logging is built in. The transmitter, imagine this, the transmitter will actually send you an email if something that you have defined that you want to be told about occurs. So it monitors itself and then sends you an email if there's a problem. And it even supports SNMP. If you have a big facilities control system and you use SNMP, the VS transmitter can work with that. So let's, without further ado, switch over to actually controlling a VS transmitter. Here's one in our Quincy, Illinois facility that's on the air at the moment in analog. As you can see, this is the spectrum analyzer in the RF domain. I can take that and make it full screen if I so desire, and I can even put a marker on the side here, and I can see where that 31 kilohertz off the carrier, we're down 22 dB. But the fun thing is I can actually switch this switch and switch over, and then I can switch to the multiplex, and I can hit OK. And now what I'm looking at is the complete composite baseband from DC to 100 kilohertz. So it's the complete composite baseband. And as it settles here, you'll see that this is the 0 to 15 kilohertz mono channel. That's the 19 kilohertz pilot, which I can click my little marker on. This is the 38 kilohertz double sideband suppressed carrier L-R signal. And you can see here that we've actually got an RDS running at 57 kilohertz. So how powerful is this to be able to remotely see what's going on at your transmitter? Understand that this is 1,900 miles away from where we are here in Nova Scotia at the moment in Quincy, Illinois, and yet I've got this kind of flexibility to see what's going on inside this transmitter. There's a number of other meters. Some of these have to do with pre-correction in HD. This one's an interesting one. This is a Lissajous. If you've ever played with an XY oscilloscope and hooked it up to a left and right channel, you can understand that it becomes a very, very useful audio tool, because I can see the left channel is horizontal here and the right channel is vertical. And I can see at the moment that this one is almost totally mono. There's very little stereo content to this, but as you see more stereo, it becomes more of a fuzzy ball. If it was to go this way, from lower right to upper left, then it would be out of phase completely, and people listening in mono wouldn't hear anything. If it was to be either flat or vertical, we'd know that one channel was down. So there's an awful lot of information you can tell at a distance about the programming going through your transmitter as we speak. Let's open up the menus here. You can see here the most powerful one is the presets, and know that there's in the VS series about 60 presets which are possible within the transmitter. So you can store 60 complete settings of just about everything that you do within the transmitter in the preset. So here we're setting the power level, the mode. I can change it to HD and FM plus HD. I can set the PA voltage. I can, over here to main audio, at the moment we're actually playing a stream in the station in Quincy, which is coming from here in Nova Scotia, a little community FM just down the road from us called Cove FM. And we're actually playing that on the station in Quincy as we speak. We can also turn up one or more SCAs. Here's the RDS that's already enabled at an injection level of 5%. And it's working with ASCII input. So if you had dynamic information coming from your automation system, it's fed right into the transmitter over IP. And over here we can do some other cool things. This is where we can set up the audio delay, the 1 pulse per second syncing. We can also set up something called mod loss timeout. Really important. This one allows you, if you set that up, what happens if our audio goes away? So we can say we're going to change the preset. Well, which preset are we going to change to? There's a list of the presets. Over what time period is considered an audio loss, this number of minutes and this number of seconds at below this threshold in terms of audio level. We also have a very simple audio processor built into the transmitter. We have a hard limiter, an AG limiter, a two-slope limiter, a left-right limiter, and for our European friends, a multiplex power limiter, because they have to do that in that part of the world. So that's what's in a preset. And going up to the other menus, system settings, where we can upgrade the software and change the calibration of the TCXO, which forms the frequency standard for the transmitter. We can do user accounts. One very powerful thing, if we're going to put this much information on the web, we have to have security in the system. So there are passwords to get into the system, and there's 3 categories of user, basically. There's an administrator, which is in essence a super user who can create new users. There's a read-write user, and that user is the one who can actually turn on and off the transmitter or make other adjustments. And then there's a read-only user, and that user can only see the screen. So you might give that to the on-air jock, for instance. And then we have the user settings, and there's a lot of these. Here's where you set up the network settings, because actually there's an IP jack on the back of the transmitter, and you've got to set up the IP settings for this transmitter. Here's where you configure up your email configuration and your notifications that you want to set up. So if I click on this one, I can see that I've chosen that I want to have sent to me anytime there's an audio loss on this transmitter. It sends me an email. And then the XGen settings, if we're running in HD, SNMP configuration, including SNMP traps. We can have an external 10 megahertz clock. We can change the mask that's shown on the spectrum analyzer from the FCC to the more international ETSI standard. Over here we set up the time. As Christy mentioned, we have an NTP client that's built into the transmitter, so we've got to know what the time zone is. So we configure that here, and over here we set up the NTP server client status. Nautel Phone Home is a very, very important feature, and we would enable the participation. And basically what that does is allow the transmitter to communicate directly to Nautel's customer service department and send information to the customer service department about the status of your transmitter. And this is very valuable because if you call the customer service department, they already have on file the readings and the things that are going on with your transmitter, and they can be that much more helpful to you when you're trying to get information about what's going on in your transmitter. So we encourage every user that has got a Nautel Phone Home enabled transmitter to turn that on, to enable participation in Call Home. And the reason is that this is not a standard feature. This is, well, it's a standard feature, but it's not enabled by default. You've got to actively turn it on yourself. You want to change what it says the transmitter is. You notice here at this top it says Quincy VS300, and that's where you put that in. And there's an opportunity to change the thresholds there as well. That's that menu. Let's see here. Remote I/O. There are remote parallel pins for input and output on this transmitter, and here you can configure exactly what they do, what they correspond to, program their actions. And then you come down here to the scheduler. Christy talked about that before. The scheduler is a rule-based scheduler, so I can click on this one here, and I can edit that, and then I can see the settings for that schedule. And that's very, very powerful. Then we can come down here to the playlist editor, and here's the songs we currently have on a USB stick in the back of the transmitter. We can drag and drop new songs to this playlist here. The one we're editing is playlist 1. We can create multiple playlists, and if I so desired, I could actually insert a jump command and switch from playlist to playlist right within the playlist, so that it will automatically allow you to navigate your way through multiple playlists. Also on this screen is where we manage our streams. I mentioned that we were bringing in a SHOUTcast or Icecast stream at the moment. This is the IP address for that. Here's how we configure that. That one is currently on the air, as you can see by the musical notes over there on the left. And here, I can't edit it at the moment because it's currently on the air. So that's where that's configured and set up. And that's a pretty good walk through that part of things. A couple of other things I want to show you. The logs is a really cool feature in the VS series. This is a log of all the things that have happened. You can see there's 2,000 events in this log right now, which sounds kind of unwieldy, but if I go to the log manager and I tell it copy logs, and now if I opened up an Excel spreadsheet and just hit Control Paste, then what would happen, or Control V, what would happen is all those 2,000 events with all the detail on them, the time and date that they happened and everything, would automatically paste it right into my spreadsheet, even though I'm not at the transmitter side. I'm a long distance away communicating through the AUI. On my PC now I have all of those log entries in my Excel file. Very, very powerful tool. Another thing that I want to show you is meters. I mentioned that the thing that distinguishes the AUI from other transmitters is the depth of things that we're monitoring. Bear in mind, this is just a 300-watt transmitter. But look here, and we'll take a look at just the things that we're monitoring here. Those are all the things that we are currently monitoring dynamically. If you look carefully, you'll see these things changing as we speak. These are the things that we're monitoring in the controller board, and then these are the things that we're monitoring in the HD exciter. And all this is happening, and all this is available to you at all times. That's why this is an advanced user interface and not just a GUI on the front of the transmitter, because it's actually so in-depth in the transmitter and showing you what the transmitter is doing. So that's how this system works. that's the basics on this system. Before I get out of here, I kind of want to take on a little bit of a tour. So this is the Quincy VS300 that we're logged into at the moment that's on the air. Now we're switched over to KUVO in Denver, and that transmitter is a demo transmitter that we've set up, and it's running an HD signal here. So you can see the two sets of sidebands here, and you can see the impulse response and equalization frequency response that are part of the adaptive pre-correction system that the transmitter is doing. You can see that the Lissajou, right now we're getting some stereo content, so it's more of a fuzzy ball. But when you see it become a straight line, that's when it's mono. We notice that they're not modulating very heavy at the moment, and we can, since it's just a demo transmitter, I can actually take the step of shutting it off. So I've done that now. And then we'll switch over to a station over here. Interesting things on this page. This is a VS2.5 in Pretoria, South Africa. And this station is being fed with a composite signal, and I know that because it's got a completely round circle in the Lissajou, and that's what you would see in the case of a composite signal or a multiplex signal being fed. It's not being fed with analog left and right. It's being fed with a multiplex signal. And I'm not sure whether that multiplex signal is AES, EBU, or BMC analog. Multiplex signals, not really relevant, I guess. The other thing that's interesting is even though they've fed the transmitter with a composite signal, they do have the Orban inside feature built into the transmitter, because if I switch over here and look at that main menu, I have the Orban inside screen here, and I can go to all the different pages in that screen and adjust the audio processing as I would. I could also load various presets. So all the presets that you would normally see in Orban are also here. So in their case of when they're bringing a stream in, or they've got a satellite receiver at the site or whatever, they have the ability to have the processor locally. One other cool feature is this button right here. That brings up that set of meters you saw before, and I can put that anywhere while I'm adjusting all these screens. So you can see how valuable that would be to the process of adjusting the transmitter in those screens. I want to thank our friends down in Pretoria, South Africa, for letting us look over their shoulder and show their transmitter operating at 2,800 watts at the moment, which is the limit for a VS series transmitter. So having said all of those things, let's come back here, and I wanted to show you one other thing. It is possible and easy to view the AUI from any place you are on your smartphone. On the left, this is a screenshot I took yesterday on my Samsung Galaxy Note 3, and using the Puffin web browser. And if you use the Puffin web browser, it allows you to see the AUI and control the AUI just as if you were in front of your PC or in front of the transmitter, for that matter. On the right-hand side, our John White here locally at Nautel has an Apple iPhone, and he took a screenshot this morning of an AUI system using, again, the Puffin web browser, which is also available for the iPhone. So very simple to control your transmitter, view your transmitter from wherever you happen to be on your smart telephone. So now it's come to the time of the program where we bring up your questions, and I'm glad to see, as I'm looking here, that there's plenty of questions, so we'll get right to it and try to answer your questions. Does the Nautel transmitter software comply with the FCC rules from remote control? Good question. I'm not quite sure that that's all you've got to have. I think you've got to have complete control of your transmitter and be able to shut it off at a distance. You can do that through the AUI. I just don't know whether the IP address, the IP connectivity is sufficient for that, or if you have to have like a telephone path or something like that. I know people have used STLs for that in the past too. Is there any real advantage in selecting a transmitter that is capable of perhaps 200% over operational power for reliability? I know the transmitters are rated for 100% duty cycle. Another good question, and thank you for that, Ray. No, there isn't. Actually, the efficiency of the transmitter goes down as you move away from its nameplate value. So, for instance, if you had a 1 kilowatt transmitter and you were going to run it at 100 watts, the efficiency of that transmitter would be less than a purpose-built 100-watt transmitter. So the answer to that is no. Certainly, there are situations where you don't want to run right at the limit in a difficult climate all the time, but in general, The answer is no. Our transmitters have so much headroom built into the design, which is where we get our reliability, that, for instance, the VS2.5 that we saw in Pretoria, South Africa just a second ago was running at 2,800 watts, which was its maximum power, and it's running that way all day long, 24/7, 365, and I'm not worried about that transmitter's reliability in the field. Now, one other thing that's important is that in a VS standpoint, you might wonder about why have a 300 in LPFM use. Well, remember that the 100 watts that LPFM is typically granted is an ERP number, and some people run a long piece of feed line, and some people run only a single bay of a circularly polarized antenna, both of which require that you have a transmitter then of more than 100 watts TPO, transmitter power output, to drive the antenna system to an ERP of 100 watts. What's the difference between the VS300 and the VS300LP? Thank you again, Ray. The answer to that, maybe Christy, would you like to answer that one?
Yeah, that's actually just an AC line filter is the only difference.
And the certification label on the back panel.
Yeah, and so that's why the two models are different.
Right. Manuel says, I'd like to see a synchronous booster in the field. Where's a good place to see this with Nautel for sure? Yeah, there's a number of locations, Manuel. We could, if you'll contact us, we'll give you some information and give you some information about where you might see one of these things in the field. Mark has asked, could you pop back to the links on the angled RF connectors and audio interface pinouts devices? Yeah, I could do that, but more importantly, within 24 hours or so, this whole webinar is going to be available in the archive on our webinars page, which is nautel.com/webinars. And my recommendation, we go back and get it there, and I'll send you the hyperlinks there, Mark, as well. With 120 transmitters with SNMP connection, do you have any console to record all the data and be able to do performance statistics? Do you have any software to do that? No, we have designed our systems to be SNMP compliant. That is, your facilities control system can, we give you the MIB files, and you can interrogate any way you want and then bring out the data in any way you want. We decided we didn't want to be the owner of that part of the software package, but certainly we're compatible with anything that is SNMP compatible, and we do support traps, and we do give you the MIB files. And in relation to push radio playlist, ENCO is currently the only system supported. Is there another suggestion I'd like to make? So this gentleman would like to be able to upload a playlist and audio files from a server and send today's playlist in case of an STL failure. Okay, that's a long, complicated question, and Charlie, I'll probably contact you offline about that, but thank you for your question. We are always looking for feedback on the push radio protocol and the ideas and the things we're doing on that, and be very, very valuable to have a conversation with you. And the presentation slides are available. As I said, the whole webinar is going to be encapsulated and put online, and anybody can download it and see it at any time. And we will also put up on that same page, when we put up the webinar, we'll also put all the links that were within that webinar, so you can actually click them right on the page. And typically that's within about 24 hours or so. And so thank you all for all of your questions. That pretty much hits all of those. To remind you where you can get more information from Nautel, we have our Nautel Waves newsletter, highly recommended, and you can subscribe at www.nautel.com/newsletter. The webinars are all available in archive format within typically about 24 hours after they're aired originally. We have our YouTube page, we have our Facebook page, we have our LinkedIn page, and we have the Nautel store where you can buy all manners of Nautel parts and accessories. And we also have the live chat feature, which allows you to talk to our customer service department at any time. I noticed that there is one more point there. So there's people already lining up to get the information from our from the links. And so then this is the information for contacting any of our gang, of our sales department, from whatever part of the world you're in. And that's about all I've got. Christy, have you got anything else you'd like to point out?
No, just I will point out there were some people who asked about the tiny URLs. All the links to those webinars are on the Nautel website right now, but like Chuck said, you'll be able to get everything through the copy of this one likely tomorrow sometime. But other than that, any questions, just please feel free to contact us. We're always here to chat.
You bet. And I will take to mention one last thing, that this month is a little bit momentous for us. This is the month of our 45th birthday. And so we're quite proud to be working with all of you for all of these years and developing the reputation that we have. And we're very, very pleased to be a part of your station. So thank you for joining us today. Look forward to seeing you at another webinar. For Christy White, I'm Chuck Kelly. Bye for now.